When a billionaire mocked her, she responded in Arabic, "What happened next will leave you amazed." In the chaos of a New York City charity gala, Amina felt the weight of two worlds colliding, her dreams shimmering with promise, and the bitter sting of prejudice cutting through her resolve. She stood adorned in her modest dress, the quietly vibrant colors contrasting the opulence around her. When Richard, the arrogant billionaire with an incisive wit, directed his ridicule at her accent, the laughter of the crowd twisted like a knife in her gut. "What did you say? Can you even pronounce healthcare?" he chortled, his laughter ringing through the hall. Amina's heart raced, an inner storm brewing. She thought of her son, sleeping in their tiny apartment, and the sacrifices she made to provide him with opportunities she never had. The dream of wearing that white coat felt more distant than ever. She fought the urge to retaliate, to let anger burst forth and demand respect. Instead, she swallowed her pride, blushing beneath the condescension that weighed heavy upon her shoulders. Why did she let him get to her? Why couldn't she respond with the confidence learned in her night classes? As Richard continued his mockery, Amina stood frozen, questioning her worth. Was she merely a punchline to people like him? Her mind spiraled into memories of bitter struggles, a healthcare assistant juggling sleepless nights and rising debts, a single mother aiming for greatness against all odds. That moment ignited a fire within her. It felt both exhilarating and paralyzing. Yet, the shock of humiliation still clung to her, intensifying her confusion. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Riding the wave of anger, Amina delved into her studies, determined to turn the humiliation into motivation. She spent her nights poring over textbooks, fueled by whispers of encouragement from her son. "You can do it, Mama," he would say, chipper and innocent, and that light empowered her momentarily. But everyone's face morphed into Richard's, that smirk as he scrutinized her in her world, and doubt crept in, gnawing at her self-esteem. Was this all she was destined for? As the days passed, she stumbled upon her family's forgotten legacy stories of esteemed physicians who had once walked among giants back home, healing and comforting those in need. The tales ignited something deep within her spirit, a longing to honor her history. But with each new revelation came an unsettling reminder of her own inadequacies, leaving her breathless with uncertainty. The day arrived when a groundbreaking research opportunity knocked on her door, a chance to showcase her findings. Yet looming at the forefront was Richard, sonorous laughter echoing in her mind. As she prepared for the conference, sweat pooled beneath the weight of impending judgment. What if he belittled her again? Could she stand against a man whose privilege loomed larger than any obstacle she had faced? Would she fold under the pressure, or would she against all odds rise, unleash the strength she never knew she possessed? In the wings of that auditorium, Amina's heart resonated with an ancient pulse, ready to confront her fiercest adversary. The moment felt electric, but doubt threatened to shatter the fragile foundation she'd built. She felt like she was teetering on the edge, ready to step into the unknown, and her family's legacy pulsed like the rhythm of the city. It was time. But could she truly step out of the shadows and claim her place under the unforgiving glare of privilege? Amina stepped into the glare of the auditorium, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the podium. The audience sat in a semicircle, an array of expectant faces blending into one uniform sea of skepticism and curiosity. Each whisper seemed to twist the knife deeper, reminding her of her place in this world, a mortal among the giants. She squared her shoulders, forcing herself to breathe, to suppress the tumult inside her. This was her moment, and she could no longer hide from it. As she glanced down at her presentation materials, the charts and graphs seemed to dance under the bright lights, a reflection of her late-night labors, 100 hours of research stemming from the life she lived. These figures weren't just numbers. They represented her journey, her resilience, a steadfast aim to break through the concrete walls of doubt that had long enveloped her. But Richard's mocking laughter reverberated in her head, a relentless echo of her insecurities. Could she dispel the shadows draped over her thoughts? She forced herself to visualize her son, the innocent sparkle in his eyes and his unwavering faith in her abilities. "Mama is strong," he'd said, and the mantra reverberated through her mind. Gathering her focus, she began. The initial words stumbled out awkwardly, like a young tree bending in a harsh wind. But gradually, as she articulated the research and the implications of her findings on healthcare accessibility, a sense of rhythm returned. Each point became a stepping stone, grounding her in conviction. The audience leaned forward as her voice grew steadier, imbued with passion. She was no longer just defending her research. She was asserting her right to be heard, to be respected. Yet, just as her confidence surged, she instinctively found Richard's figure seated at the back, arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. The glimmer of amusement lingered on his features, and suddenly her heart sank. Did she truly believe she could challenge him? What if her work didn't hold the weight she had hoped? Panic flared momentarily, but she reined it in. This was not just about her. It was about all those who had been silenced, discounted, and overlooked like the very patients she aimed to serve. In that instant, Amina flushed with clarity. Doubt needed to fuel her fire, not extinguish it. As she continued, her visuals now resonated with urgency. The graphs illustrated a dire need for change, a need she was determined to fulfill. The applause that echoed in the auditorium felt surreal, a mix of surprise and clarity swelling in her chest. Could she inspire them? Could she prompt a shift? After the presentation, as she descended from the stage, people approached her a mix of genuine curiosity and admiration. In an unexpected turn, someone even asked her for her insights on a collaborative initiative. Richard watched from a distance, surprise flickering behind the facade. For the first time that evening, Amina felt a crack in his armor of prejudice. Perhaps she was more than just a momentary distraction for him. Perhaps she was beginning to rewrite her story, to redefine public perception, to reclaim her worth. Yet the victory tasted bittersweet. The applause faded, replaced by the invincible shadow of doubt that always loomed. What if this moment was fleeting? She considered how one man's perception could shift the landscape of her reality yet again. It was time to confront Richard, to tease apart the complexities of their interaction, to see if he was capable of recognizing her triumph. But how would she approach him? The time had come to face her mocker, but would she be strong enough to demand the respect she had earned? Amina stood backstage, her heart pummeling against her chest as adrenaline coursed through her veins. Faces of those who had applauded flashed before her eyes, mingled with Richard's cold expression that haunted her thoughts. How could she reach him? This man who had dismissed her efforts so easily, stripped them of their value with a sneer. The prospect of confronting him twisted anxiety into a tight knot in her stomach. For years, Richard had been the epitome of the unyielding elite, his privilege towering over the everyday struggles of people like her. The complexities of their shared environment made every interaction a high-stakes game. She ruminated on how his dismissive attitude had seeped into her earlier life, nurturing her fears, breeding doubt. Yet today felt different. She had stood before a crowd and shattered those walls. But this confrontation was not merely about Richard. It was a pivotal moment in her growth. It was time to wield the confidence that had blossomed on stage. Taking a deep breath, she made her way through the gathering audience, aware of her surroundings, the buzz of conversation, laughter, moments of genuine celebration. Each step echoed in her mind, reminding her that she had already faced a challenge far greater than a conversation with a man. Upon reaching Richard, she hesitated just for a second, silence hanging heavily between them. The resounding applause chased away the cowardice lingering in her heart. "Richard," she initiated, her voice firm, pushing through the barriers of trepidation. His brow furrowed, surprise competing with condescension. "Didn't he expect to see you here, Amina? That was quite a performance," he remarked, his tone teetering dangerously close to mockery. Quite a performance. Amina felt a muffled sense of indignation rise within her. I didn't just perform. I shared something that matters. It's a reality check for people like you, living in their gilded cages. Richard scoffed. Reality checks don't change the world. Amina. Change comes with resources and influence things you seem to lack. His words stung, but rather than retreat, she leaned in closer, a calm resolve igniting her. Influence is not just about wealth. It's about impacting lives and building bridges where none exist. You say I lack resources, but I come from a place that has taught me how to thrive without them. Change begins with understanding. How far can your resources stretch if they don't encompass empathy? Richard's eyes narrowed, his expression undergoing a subtle shift. For a moment, he looked vulnerable, caught off guard by her unexpected clarity. Empathy is subjective, he replied, but his tone was less dismissive. Exactly, and yours comes from perspectives you refuse to acknowledge. I've shared data that reflects urgent need, a reality that transcends charts and graphs. What you call lack of resources is actually a treasure trove of humanity waiting to shape solutions. The tension crackled around them, dozens of conversations buzzing both in her ears and around Richard like static electricity. Would he understand the depth of her message, or simply dismiss her again? She refused to retreat this time. Do you even hear the voices from your ivory tower, Richard? She could see the flicker of contemplation cross his face, fear creeping in as her words unraveled his confidence. This wasn't the Amina he once knew. She was no longer the uncertain woman waiting to be validated. She was boldly asserting her worth and the necessity of genuine connection. But just as she sensed a shift, a forceful reminder of their differences emerged. You think your speech meant something monumental? Richard scoffed, laughter mingling with disdain. You think you can alter the course of things just like that? The abyss of his doubt twisted something in Amina. She sensed the evolving dynamics of their interaction, and instead of feeling diminished, she felt empowered. Watch me, she challenged, the weight of those words resonating deeper than any before. Perhaps this was the beginning of something larger, a transformation not just for herself but for many. How could the man standing before her, so consumed by his privilege, possibly grasp the magnitude of her determination? As she walked away, the flicker of intrigue in Richard's eyes ignited a sliver of hope within her. Could she genuinely disturb his convictions? The path toward understanding each other's worlds had been paved this evening. But the deeper questions remained: how far could her resolve reach? And was it enough to bridge the gulf? The thought lingered as she navigated through the gathering crowd, each step echoing a possibility that sent shivers of uncertainty through her. And so, she prepared to enter the next phase of her journey, confronting the ghosts of her past, revisiting the foundations of her ambition. But before she could delve deeper, another figure captured her attention, one from her past who had only ever reinforced her doubts. Would this encounter lead to clarity or be yet another obstacle in her path? Amina paused as the figure emerged from the shadows, a familiar smirk twisting her stomach into knots. It was Ian, a once close friend who had distanced himself when her ambitions began to blossom. His polished demeanor contrasted sharply with her own raw intensity, and the dissonance of their paths was palpable. Memories flooded in those early days of shared dreams, when the world seemed ripe for their taking. Now, it felt as if the air was charged with an unspoken challenge. "Fancy meeting you here," he said, eyes gleaming with a mix of intrigue and derision. "You really went for it tonight, didn't you?" Addressing that crowd like they were actually listening. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the memory of their past conversations, where she had often second-guessed her dreams. "I must have captured something important," she retorted, deciding against sharing the vulnerability that churned inside her. Or perhaps they simply came looking for authenticity, not another district gala speech. Ian chuckled, but it lacked genuine humor and spilled over with condescension. "Authenticity doesn't pay the bills, Amina. You should know that by now. What's your plan? To change the world with your words? You know most people don't care about how the other half lives." Her fists clenched involuntarily at his words, that old doubt creeping in again. But something within her had shifted. The warrior spirit ignited on stage was smoldering at the edges of her psyche, ready to fan into flames. "At least I'm daring to try," she said, steady in her conviction. "How many lives have you transformed behind your screen? Are you content to just sit and comment on others' bravery?" For a moment, his facade faltered, and she saw flickers of something deeper. Was it fear? Regret? The pulse of vulnerability was intoxicating, almost palpable, yet she remained on guard. Ian was not just another obstacle. He was a mirror reflecting the insecurities of her past. "What do you expect? This is the world we live in," he replied, regaining his composure. "Try to bring empathy to a boardroom debate, and watch the numbers fall flat." "But these conversations matter to people," Amina replied fiercely, leaning slightly closer. "They resonate on a human level. I want to spark change, even if it's just one dialogue at a time." Inside her stirred awareness of her capability, the ability to disrupt conversations, to push against the stifling narratives that had once enveloped her. For so long, she had diluted her voice, afraid of being dismissed or ignored. Now, standing face to face with Ian, she felt the snare of self-doubt loosening its grip. "You think you're some crusader for the people now?" He scoffed, scrutinizing her with a sharp, appraising gaze. "Come on, Amina. You're smart enough to know how naive that sounds." She took a breath, her resolve solidifying. "Then call me naive. But you know what? I'm ready to embrace the inherent contradictions in the world and face them head-on. I'm tired of waiting for validation." His visage hardened, an intellectual restraint layering over panic. "You'll learn soon enough that passion only gets you so far. The real world won't coddle you like you think it will." Before she could respond, a burst of laughter erupted nearby, abruptly ripping the tension thickening around them. It snapped her back to the moment, grounding her in the awareness that there were people who were ready to listen, who would do more than mock or belittle. "Maybe you're right, Ian," she conceded, adopting a softer tone that surprised even her. "But I'm willing to learn. Do you have the courage to let me? To see not just what I'm capable of, but what we both could become?" The question hung between them, alive with possibility. A vulnerability had crept into their exchange, hinting at a confrontation between past views and future aspirations. As she looked into his eyes, Amina wondered what their encounter might catalyze, not just for her, but for him as well. Perhaps this was a chance for both to redefine the parameters of themselves, bridging chasms they each feared to traverse alone. With determination coursing through her veins, she stepped back from the ledge of nostalgia. There was a world waiting for her filled with authentic dialogue, real connections, and the hope of tangible progress. But as she prepared to take that step forward, Ian's parting words echoed in her mind, his challenge curling around her like a thick fog. "Time will tell, Amina. But remember, the real monsters are hidden in plain sight." In that moment, determination twisted into uncertainty again. What did he know that she didn't? And how much of her own past still loomed to challenge her path ahead? Her next move would determine more than just her future. It would reshape everything she stood for. Amina stood on the fringes of the gathering, the laughter and chatter of those mingling around her drowning out the pulse of her thoughts. Ian's final words rattled in her head like a warning bell, igniting both anxiety and inner resilience. She couldn't ignore the implications of his challenge. What monsters lurked in her own mind, threatening to dismantle the very ambitions she fought to build. Taking a deep breath, she pulled her shoulders back and adjusted her posture. She was not going to let doubt seep into her core. It was time for action, not hesitation. A soft voice within urged her to connect with others, to transform that ardent passion bubbling within her into tangible dialogue. With a newfound determination, Amina navigated through the crowd, her heart thrumming with both excitement and fear. She engaged a few individuals, listening intently, and sharing her insights on the often ignored narratives that populated everyday lives. The initial tremor of vulnerability in her voice waned as she spoke, replaced by the steadiness born from the clarity of her purpose. Every conversation felt invigorating. She could feel the collective energy shift, She wasn't merely speaking into the void. People nodded, engaged, some sharing snippets of their struggles, practicing the very conversations she yearned to inspire. With every interaction, she unearthed glimpses of their hidden truths, riding the waves of understanding that transformed simple words into bridges of connectivity. But Ian's doubts resurfaced, a shadow lurking on the edges. Could those moments truly initiate change? She knew that merely talking wouldn't be enough. The fire in her chest became a furnace of inspiration, leading herself to confront her own actions and choices moving forward. She recalled a time in college when she had actively sought mentorship, hungering for guidance but too scared to fully assert herself. Now, determination rippled through her veins. It was her turn to become that mentor, to help those lost among their own illusions of inadequacy. As she made her way across the gathering, her eyes landed on a familiar face, a woman named Grace, an acquaintance who had always radiated quiet strength but seemed to shrink away in the limelight. Amina's heart quickened. This was her chance to put her newfound resolve into action. She made her way over, introducing herself with open arms. "Grace, I've watched you hold back in so many conversations," Amina began, the sincerity palpable in her tone. "You have so much insight to offer. Don't let the noise drown out your voice." Grace looked hesitant, shadows of insecurity clouding her gaze. "But what if I say something wrong? What if they laugh?" Amina placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, her heart echoing with the urgency to inspire someone else to step into their power. "What if it leads to a breakthrough? Every voice matters, especially yours. Don't let fear dictate your worth." A flicker of recognition sparked in Grace's eyes, a silenced fire beginning to ignite. Meanwhile, self-doubt lingered like a trespasser within Amina's psyche, whispering insidious reminders of Ian's critique. Maybe she was being naive. This wasn't going to transform overnight. But this was where her development lay, standing firm while facing those inner demons. Just then, Ian re-entered her field of vision, engrossed in conversation across the room. The sight sent a jolt through her. As much as she wanted to believe she transcended his toxicity, the nagging weight of his voice in her memory attempted to pull her back into the pit of uncertainty, her breath caught, overwhelmed by the push and pull of his influence. Here stood her past, a specter attempting to anchor her down, while in her chest, the need for growth surged, the need to forge her path regardless of anyone else's opinions. And that moment struck her. This was not just about her journey anymore. If she continued to embrace this growth, she could lead others like Grace amidst critics and cynics to courageously express their truths as well. As she turned back to her own conversations, Amina clenched her teeth and resolved to keep pressing forward, even when doubt threatened to undermine her. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. If confronting Ian were to come later, the real question lingered. Would she have the courage to challenge not only his beliefs but the many layers of societal expectations placed upon her as well? The air hummed with tension as the next phase of her journey loomed, just ahead, an intersection where monsters appeared to take shape, waiting silently to test her grit and resolve. Amina paused, grounding herself as the vibrant conversations swirled around her. She had come to realize that growth often required stepping beyond her comfort zone, a notion that had previously terrified her. Yet, as she glanced back at Grace, whose eyes now shimmered with the flickers of newfound confidence, Amina recognized the profound impact of encouragement. Her heart drummed a steady rhythm, propelling her into action. With Ian still in view, a bold thought emerged. Perhaps this was the moment she needed to voice her dissent, her refusal to silence herself under the shadow of judgment. She would not succumb to being dismissed or belittled. Instead, she would assert her presence. Determined, she pressed on, weaving her way toward another small group embedded in conversation. These were not strangers, but familiar faces from her past, individuals whose paths had intersected during formative years. Would they remember her differently now, armed with renewed purpose? As she approached, the laughter faded, eyes turning in her direction. Amina squared her shoulders and let her voice rise above the murmurs. "I have something to contribute," she asserted, her tone carrying an edge of urgency. Their surprise morphed into curiosity, and for the first time, she felt the power of collective attention focusing on her. What do you think, Amina? One of her old classmates, Sam, prompted, seeking to involve her. The challenge of speaking to people she had once felt inferior to sent a wave of exhilaration through her. She hadn't merely come to engage. She had come to disrupt the status quo of her own narrative. I think there's a lot more at stake when we hesitate to voice our truths, she began, her thoughts crystallizing with every word. We carry stories in us that could shift perspective, stories that challenge the norms dictated by what society deems acceptable. But if we continue to choose silence, we forfeit the chance to make an impact. A resonance of agreement rippled through the crowd. Amina observed their expressions tighten, some nodding while others looked contemplative, grappling with the weight of her message. Yet, Ian's shadow loomed large behind her, a ghostly reminder of defeat. His laughter echoed in her psyche, a siren luring her back to self-doubt. Remember who you are, she chanted internally, summoning the voices of those who had resonated with her words earlier. Her resolve sharpened, igniting a flame of clarity. This was not merely about respecting her own inner voice but also about fighting against the societal currents that sought to cage others in complacency. The conversation took a turn, with others sharing personal anecdotes of censorship they faced, revealing layers of vulnerability. Amina found herself captivated by their stories, weaving her own experiences into the collective narrative. She could feel the energy swell, a palpable longing for authenticity rising among them. Then, a question echoed through the ambience, sharp and piercing. But what if no one listens? It was another voice, an old rival, someone who had once held sway over the discourse in their circle. But Amina felt a surge of empowerment. Then we create spaces where our voices demand to be heard, she countered, resting her gaze on this critic with a steady determination. Listening is an active choice. We can't wait for others to validate us. Often, it's in our refusal to conform that we discover our true strength. The fire of her conviction resonated, and instead of a defensive posture, she felt the power of her words unspool like vines, wrapping tighter around their collective understanding. This was the essence of growth. Not just initiating change within herself, but becoming an agent of transformation for those struggling in silence. As she stepped back, taking in the gleeful exchange of ambitious ideas, a sense of triumph enveloped her. The monsters of insecurity started to lose their sharpness, their bite dulled by her resoluteness. Yet, Ian's presence lingered still, a reminder that the battle with self-doubt was far from over. As she scanned the room, something peculiar caught her attention, a woman on the other side, whom she had never noticed before but felt a stirring connection to. Would her next challenge be as simple as reaching out to the unfamiliar, or would she have to confront the lurking shadows of expectation that Ian had personified? The ground beneath her felt charged with anticipation as she watched the woman engage with others, each laugh echoing with potential, each gesture teasing of a deeper story waiting to be uncovered. Amina took a decisive breath, feeling a weight lift as the question hung in the air. Could she step beyond a mere encouragement? If fate beckoned her onward, how many more narratives awaited her discovery? Amina felt the weight of the moment pressing against her chest as she contemplated the unfamiliar woman across the room. The intrigue swelled within her, fluttering like a caged bird desperate to escape. She had momentarily basked in the glow of her breakthrough, but now a flicker of trepidation threatened to extinguish that light. Who was this woman? What stories lay behind that infectious smile? She forced herself to take a measured breath, recalling the heat of the last conversation and the potency of her own voice. If she truly aimed to champion the authenticity she had championed so vigorously, this would be her next hurdle. Not only embracing her own narrative, but also opening herself to the narratives of others. Amina steeled her nerves, realizing that connecting with the stranger could not only fortify her own growth but perhaps illuminate a new path for them both. With each step toward the woman, Amina confronted the shadows of doubt that danced around her mind. As she drew near, the laughter began to recede. The woman's gaze met hers, bringing a momentary spark of recognition, a chorus of possibilities unfolding between them. "Hi, I'm Amina," she introduced herself, her voice steady despite the quickened pulse in her veins. "Lara," the woman replied, her demeanor warm and inviting. "I was just listening to your earlier comments. Powerful stuff. Empowered by Lara's acknowledgement, Amina pressed on. Thank you. It felt liberating to finally speak up. It's funny how long we can carry silence like a burden. I senti it? Lara nodded thoughtfully, her eyes glimmering with understanding. Absolutely. I've often found myself wrapped in a cocoon of expectations, afraid to even whisper my thoughts. Amina's heart swelled at the shared sentiment. Here was an opportunity not only for mutual support, but perhaps also a chance to redefine their own narratives together. What if their combined voices were a catalyst for something greater than either could achieve alone? Should we challenge those expectations together? Amina posed, her excitement bubbling over. What if we shared our stories more openly? It's about breaking through, I senti it? Lara's smile broadened, and enthusiasm sparked between them. I've always wanted to host a discussion forum, just a space where people can bring their truths without fear of backlash. Do you think we could make that happen? The vision crystallized in Amina's mind. This was a call to arms, a personal crusade that transcended their individual struggles. Yes, we can create our own narrative, a space where vulnerability becomes strength, Amina exclaimed. She felt adrenaline coursing through her. This was more than an idea, it was an evolution of purpose. Yet, just as exhilaration surged through her, a familiar thread of doubt surfaced, woven tightly in the fabric of her experience. What if they failed? What if the echoes of Ian's laughter snared her again, reminding her of her place? The struggle between the visions intermingling in her mind and the voices of loss that had once claimed her confidence simmered within Amina, treading dangerously close to self-sabotage. I've always been a bit shy, you know? What if I can't live up to this? She confessed, the vulnerability escaping her lips before she could catch it. Lara leaned in closer, her eyes probing. We won't know unless we try. Strength is often forged through the act of simply trying, even when fear looms large. Amina absorbed the truth of those words, a beacon that pulled her from the depths of doubt. They were kindred souls yearning for growth amid the rubble of past fears, sparking a glimmer of clarity amidst the chaos. What if we announced our forum tonight? She suggested suddenly, propelled by the surfacing excitement of a plan. An idea so bold it bordered on madness. Lara's eyes widened, and a rush of energy pulsed between them. A challenge had been set. Let us do it, Lara replied, determination glinting in her gaze. The course was set, yet Amina felt a prickle of unease, as if the universe was holding its breath. This new endeavor could either catapult her forward or plunge her back into the shadows. Would she ultimately transcend her fears and claim the narrative they aimed to create together? With Lara by her side and her heart racing with the adrenaline of risk, Amina braced herself for the looming challenge. In this moment of shared ambition, a question appeared on the horizon. Could she fully embrace the power of their collaboration and emerge unscathed by her past? Or would this venture test her resolve in ways she could not yet anticipate? As Amina and Lara forged their plans, the energy between them began to morph, punctuating the air with a palpable sense of urgency and promise. Amina's mind raced. The prospect of sharing their narratives ignited a fire within her. But just beneath that flame simmered an undercurrent of dread. Each exhilarating thought was quickly followed by memories of humiliation and self-doubt. I should probably send out invitations right away, Amina said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. As she pulled out her phone, she felt the familiar tremor in her hands, a reminder of the countless times her voice had faltered under scrutiny. Let us not rush it, Lara advised, her voice calm. We need to create something that reflects our authentic selves. Maybe we should brainstorm the content first, focus on what we want to say. Amina appreciated Lara's careful approach, contrasting sharply with her impulsiveness. She often leaped before looking, spurred on by adrenaline, but this time felt different. She wanted to ensure they grounded their vision in sincerity. You're right, she admitted. Let us consider our audience. What do we want them to take away from this? Transformation, Lara answered without hesitation. I want people to feel empowered, to see that their stories matter and can spark change. Amina's heart raced at the thought of it. Could she truly craft an environment ripe for transformation? With her heart pounding in her throat, she considered not just their messages, but also their pasts. Let us talk about vulnerability, Amina proposed tentatively, already seeing the threads they could weave together. What about sharing our own experiences, our challenges with expectation and fear? That could really resonate. I agree, Lara said, the excitement in her voice building. But we have to make sure we do it authentically. What if we each shared a moment that shaped us most profoundly? Amina nodded, the prospects swirling around her so that a new vision emerged. They could model courage, turning their journeys of fear into a robust narrative of empowerment. It could be their greatest strength that their vulnerability was not a weakness, but rather the foundation for collaboration. The two began to outline their stories, hesitating only at their most vulnerable points. Amina had never articulated the loneliness she felt when Ian mocked her aspirations, but in sharing that pain, she recognized its transformative potential. Maybe we make our own experiences the backbone of the forum, Amina suggested, her voice steadier now. That way, we demonstrate what we're encouraging others to do, authentically share their truths. Yes, it's all about forging connections. Lara agreed with infectious enthusiasm. If we start with ourselves, it humanizes this venture. It shows people that every story, no matter how painful, is a step towards healing. Amina felt lighter with each idea they exchanged, the last remnants of hesitation unraveling. Engaging with Lara allowed her the freedom to confront her fears actively. Yet within her newfound clarity lingered a question. Could her revelations truly resonate with others who felt as isolated as she once did? As they dove deeper into ideas, Amina felt a stirring within. She sensed the potential shift now coursing through her. Each practical step toward this forum was an action against the shadows of her past. There, even amid the budding excitement, the doubt still clung to her like a second skin. What if, despite our vision, we inspire no one? She said, voicing the fear that clawed at her insides. Lara paused, then looked directly at Amina. And what if we do? What if even one person feels less alone by sharing their story? That declaration resonated more than Amina expected. Each word felt like an invitation to change, a challenge to push through her self-imposed barriers. Could she dare to believe in the possibilities beyond fear? Just as the discussion reached a fever pitch, an unexpected thought settled into Amina's mind. What if Lara's confidence was just a facade, hiding her own vulnerabilities? Intrigued by this new thread of exploration, Amina wondered what stories hid behind that infectious smile, perhaps even some parallels to her own. Lara, do you ever feel overwhelmed by your own expectations? Amina asked, her curiosity piqued. The room fell silent for a moment as Lara seemed to ponder her answer. The atmosphere shifted, and Amina realized that the challenge she faced with her own narratives was mirrored across the room, each woman with her own stories of fear, waiting to be spoken. As curiosity ignited a new energy, Amina understood that this bond, forged through vulnerability, could be the pivotal moment she needed. The question loomed above them: how many more stories were out there just waiting for release? Trapped like caged birds hoping for the door to open? Amina braced herself, feeling the weight of purpose settle firmly on her shoulders. Would their collaboration lead her into an exciting new chapter of growth? Or would it unearth new fears she wasn't ready to face? The impending revelation loomed larger than ever, waiting in the shadows as anticipation suffused the air. Amina felt the silence stretch, the weight of her question resonating in the air. Lara's expression shifted, a glimpse of uncertainty flashing across her bright eyes, quickly masked by her usual confidence. The tension in the room morphed from excitement to something unspoken, as if a fragile veil had been drawn back, revealing fears they both understood yet dared not voice. It's hard sometimes, Lara finally admitted, her voice softer, revealing a layer of vulnerability that Amina had not anticipated. I think we all face pressure. The expectations we set for ourselves can be overwhelming. It's like standing on a tightrope, and one misstep could send us crashing down. Amina nodded, her heart swelling with sympathy. The idea of sharing burdens, however heavy, began to clarify the path ahead, allowing the possibility of healing to surface through their shared struggles. I feel that way too often, she confessed. The fear of not being good enough haunts me daily. I want to share my story, but what if it isn't inspiring enough? Lara's response was immediate. Your story is yours alone. Carries weight simply because it's yours. You have no idea how many people feel the same way but are too afraid to say it. Those words seemed to settle into Amina's psyche, a reminder that her narrative mattered. For so long, she had viewed her experiences as flaws, pieces of herself she needed to hide. But now, faced with the stark realization of vulnerability as a tool of strength, Amina recognized an opportunity. Maybe we need to confront that fear head-on, she suggested, her voice gaining strength. What if we framed our forum not just as a place for sharing, but as an arena for confrontation? We could even invite participants to discuss not only their triumphs but their struggles. The prospect excited her. Perhaps the answer to her hesitation lay in the concept of mutual empowerment. Speaking from the heart is the best way to connect, Lara agreed, visibly invigorated. We can turn this into a true exchange, not just a list of dos and don'ts. This can be a catalyst for change, even within ourselves. Still, doubt slithered through Amina's thoughts. The more she ventured into her insecurities, the heavier they felt, but her growing determination pushed her forward. With each passing moment, she weighed the potential impact that those raw discussions could have not just on the audience, but also on her journey of reclaiming herself. What if we create an invite that challenges people? Lara suggested, her eyes lighting up with fresh inspiration. Something that will pull at their fears, prompt them to dig deeper into their own stories? Amina caught the spark of Lara's enthusiasm, her mind racing to piece together their visions. We could ask them to share the obstacles they're afraid to confront, an open question that lays the groundwork for a more profound dialogue. The thought of sculpting such a bold invitation invigorated Amina's spirit. In this new framework, she envisioned her journey shifting from isolation to connection, not only with the audience but with herself. I'd love to craft that inviting tone together, Amina said, infused with newfound courage. It seemed like the right moment for both of them to step into the light of their authenticity. But as excitement surged within her, a nagging self-doubt whispered its familiar refrain. Was it truly possible that their authenticity would resonate? Or would they continue to stumble in the shadows, paralyzed by overthinking? Questions loomed, echoing doubts that threatened to overshadow their intentions. Just as they prepared to dive back into brainstorming, Lara's gaze fixated on something abstractly distant. What if she hesitated, briefly lost in thought before continuing? What if we used our own expectations to fuel our stories? Could be the ultimate way to shatter our fears and inspire others. Their mutual excitement was palpable, but Amina felt a stir of apprehension bloom in her chest. This vulnerability could shatter the constraints she had built around herself, yet it was a risk she began to see as essential. With this potent mix of anticipation and trepidation coursing through her, Amina could feel the walls of her past beginning to crack. The act of exposing her truth to the world felt overwhelming, yet exhilarating. What lay ahead, she realized, required more than a simple leap into vulnerability. It demanded a confrontation with the intricate layers of her identity and fears. Like the questions awaiting their first dialogue, would she pull apart more than their insecurities? Or would this venture illuminate hidden strengths? The scene was set for an unveiling beyond anything she had anticipated, a true unveiling of herself. Amina took a deep breath, feeling the familiar reminder of dread and exhilaration intertwine. The moment of decision loomed larger than ever, but she felt herself inching closer to a pivotal realization. The hardest stories were often the greatest gifts. As she exchanged thoughts with Lara, Amina sensed an undeniable truth surfacing. Both of them were teetering on the edge of self-discovery and transformation. Could this moment of introspection lead her into uncharted territory, the silence of her earlier fears replaced by a voice empowered? Or would those deeper shadows threaten to drown out their best intentions? The stakes were set, and ahead lay a challenge demanding confrontation in that charged atmosphere. Amina wondered if she was finally ready to uncover not just her story, but also the myriad tales that lingered behind every fear-filled heart around her. Weeks turned into months as Amina and Lara plunged into the depths of their shared vision, building a forum that promised transformation for themselves and others. The seeds of vulnerability they had planted transcended expectations, blossoming into a sanctuary where narratives could flourish without fear. Amina, once gripped by the ghost of Richard's mockery, now found her voice growing richer, resounding with strength. Each session they hosted attracted vibrant souls hungry for authenticity and connection. People from various backgrounds sharing their trials, triumphs, and raw truths. What started as a dialogue emerged into a chorus celebrating the power of the human experience. The conference evolved into a thriving community aiming for change, challenging preconceived notions about struggles that span class, culture, and identity. As the forum gained traction, Amina felt the profound weight of accomplishment on her shoulders. She garnered accolades not just for her research but as a pioneering voice in driving reform in healthcare accessibility. The community recognized her efforts, embracing her as a catalyst not merely for policy change, but the embodiment of genuine transformation. Lara stood by her side, a kindred spirit and collaborator, pushing each other beyond prior limitations. Together, they hosted workshops and panels, reaching out to local leaders and organizations. Each engagement reinforced Amina's newfound belief in her capabilities. Her heart swelled with solid confidence, testament to the fierce journey she undertaken to rise from ridicule. Richard's laughter no longer haunted her. Instead, it served as a reminder of the strength she had cultivated from adversity. Every sobering moment of self-doubt had ironed out her intensity, turning pain into profound growth. She recognized how each fearful echo had fueled her momentum. Would Richard still dismiss her? She didn't dwell on it. She had transformed his derision into the blueprint for her achievements. The ultimate challenge arose when Amina was invited to showcase their community's impact at a national conference. The prospect stirred anxiety, yet instead of succumbing to fear, she embraced the opportunity with conviction. This was not merely a platform. It was a chance to propel the conversations that had once been silenced. As she prepared, Amina left no detail to chance. The audience would be filled with skeptics. Yet she leaned into her research, passion, and the undeniable stories collected from forum participants. Amina realized that success stemmed not from overcoming Richard's biases alone, but from honoring those who had supported her journey. The stories she carried would captivate and inspire change. On the day of the conference, Amina stood backstage, nerves tingling in her fingertips. The audience before her was a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Yet she could feel the weight of what she represented. This was a moment of culmination, a theater not just for her achievements, but for those whose voices had reverberated through their forum. When she stepped onto the stage, she felt the echoes of her past wash away. The trembling in her hands ceased as she launched into her presentation with bold assurance. Her voice, once tinted with doubt, rang clear in its authenticity. As she outlined their successes and underscored the need for change, she began telling stories from the forum, vulnerable narratives of pain, resilience, and healing. Each tale carried with it a heartbeat. Each heartbeat resonated with hope. The audience leaned in, entranced, as Amina articulated how empathy must govern their actions and policies. She invited them into a dialogue, challenging the status quo while celebrating the lessons learned from the voices she had once silenced within herself. The round of applause that erupted as she concluded felt like an awakening. It was a reaffirmation that stories mattered and that vulnerability could generate immense power. Even Richard's presence loomed in the back, though no longer as a hindrance but as a marker of her evolution. Amina's journey had come full circle. She felt a thunderous sense of fulfillment as she stepped off the stage, knowing she had transformed not just her life, but also touched those who listened. Conversations bubbled around her as others approached for insight and collaboration. Her confidence, once tested, stood resolute, recognized by those who admired her strength. In that moment, Amina embraced the validation she had long sought. It didn't just stem from others but from the unwavering belief in herself. She had conquered her insecurities and grasped her place in the world, no longer merely surviving but flourishing. This triumph wasn't solely hers. It belonged to every woman who felt unseen and unheard, every story waiting to be told. Amina had learned that personal growth radiates outward, changing lives one connection at a time, lighting the path for others to follow. As she left the conference hall, a firm determination pulsed within her. She would continue fostering dialogues, relentlessly engaging with the unspoken, challenging barriers wherever they arose. She realized that her greatest achievement lay not in silencing the doubters but in nurturing a flourishing garden of empathy where all voices could thrive. This was her moment of success, blooming in electric vigor. She had transformed her narrative and, in doing so, sculpted a reality where others could reclaim their stories. And now, it is your moment to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Every click makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this journey of personal overcoming. You need to support us. Don't wait even one more second to share this inspiring message.